So my name is Björn, and I'm quite excited, right, to finally be able to take you on the Polkadot journey today. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I really will try to shed some light on where Polkadot started, what's been the motivation behind it, to where we've come so far, and perhaps tease some of what I believe lies ahead of us. And, I really want to give you though an opportunity to understand and feel what has been driving many of us to create Polkadot. So let me start off by taking you all the way back to 2009. That's right. We're finding ourselves in the aftermath of the 2007-2008 financial crisis when Satoshi Nakamoto published the revolutionary Bitcoin white paper. With this paper, Satoshi provided us with a blueprint for what they thought could be a purely peer-to-peer electronic cash system that would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. And interestingly, Satoshi made no secret of his motivation behind it. In fact, they engraved a note into kind of the DNA of the Bitcoin network that referenced a 2008 newspaper article by the Times, I believe, from London that discussed yet another bailout of financial institutions considered by the British government. Now, after its launch, Bitcoin gained attention, particularly by the cypherpunk community. And the many talented hackers in this community started tinkering with simple currency-related applications around Bitcoin. Some of you, I believe, may remember the time, colored coins were all the rage. Well, fast forward to 2014, Vitalik Buterin proposes Ethereum, right? A system that would make that sort of experimentation around programmable money easier. A platform entirely designed for building programmable money, enabled by what we recognize today as smart contracts. Shortly after, Gavin Wood joined forces with him to specify the system and ship the code. Along the way, he expanded the scope of the project with his larger vision of a world computer to serve as one of the fundamental pillars of a new web that was coined Web 3.0. And I'm pretty sure many of you will have heard about this idea for a new web. But, for those of you that haven't, let me give you a brief rundown on what this is all about for us. So, if we look into how digital products and services are being built and delivered for us today, we find that the following client-server architecture that you see here dominate today's web. As users, right, all of us use applications on our devices, be it computers, phones, that depend entirely on data being guarded and business logic being executed on servers controlled by institutions. That is, today's web was really designed around this notion of trust into these institutions. Now, why is that important to highlight, right? I guess if you think about it, right, in using these applications, we're giving away way more of our data, information, preference, and so forth than ever before. And, I think, I would claim that the latest since the Snowden revelations in 2013, it has become very clear that those institutions are abusing that information, right? And, on this timeline, you will see some of these examples that I think really underline this message, right? So I think probably most of you will have heard of a program called PRISM, right? This program that involved the United States NSA accessing emails, documents, photographs, and other sensitive data of users from 9 of the largest companies, including Facebook and some other well-known companies. Now, the Washington Post actually reported that the program became the NSA top source of raw intelligence at some point, right? Accounting for, I think, nearly 15% of intelligence reports and serving as, and that was stated by the Washington, the most prolific contributor to President Barack Obama's daily briefing, right? So that's what he got on his table every day. 15% of that was highly informed by this illegal program. Now, there are a few other examples, right, that I think highlight that, right? We saw, further down the line in 2013 and 14, further, we saw several covered partnerships with tech companies, right, where these spy agencies had inserted secret vulnerabilities into encryption software. And among other things, it was revealed that agency officials conducted keyword searches and email searches on committee staff while they used the network. And, it's not just about these cases where companies are not actively giving away your information, right? My information. It's really, we can't just trust their security either, right? So even if they are not malicious in that context, they just might not have good enough security. And that was really exemplified and shown by the hacks of the French presidency election campaign, as well as this monumental Equifax hack in 2017. Now, I think we really believe the only realistic way out of this misery here is to build a new web that relies less on trust, but rather guarantees truth. And, there's this very famous idea that a company was started with called Don't Be Evil. And I think we really have to get to a point where we have the tools in place, right? Where we can go from don't be evil to can't be evil. And I want to give you on the way a few, principles or idea what this new web could, what characteristics this new web could have. So first of all, I think this new web would help remove the divide between users on one hand and service providers on the others. And at the same time, allowing for strong network effects, right? Without the monopolies, our digital overlords of today. Furthermore, I think it would help prove yourself, your identity, your intention in an encrypted and secure way. And it should definitely have its own governance where people participating in it can vote for how the system updates, right? So have some sort of say in it. And, if you think about it, I think, Web3 is essentially designed around this shared truth as a concept. And it could technically also be described as some sort of extensible framework for creating massively multi-user, economically strong applications. Those applications today are mostly called decentralized applications. And now, going back for where we left a couple of minutes ago with Ethereum, when Ethereum came out, I believe Ethereum really paved the way here for the first major wave of experiments with these decentralized applications. We saw the first financial applications with prediction markets such as Augur, what else? Stablecoins such as MakerDAO, liquidity protocols such as Digix that really made gold more accessible. And all of them together kind of lay the groundwork for a whole new ecosystem called decentralized finance. And beyond that, this sub-ecosystem of decentralized finance, we really saw experiments that emphasized further Web3 possibilities beyond the financial sector. For example, Golem's decentralized computing system, Swarm's decentralized storage system, and CryptoKitties showcasing what can be done around gaming. Now, but this is around 2016, right? What I'm talking about, 2016, 17, and it didn't take all that long from when Ethereum launched in 2015 until limitations surfaced that really severely hamper projects in realizing their vision and promises that they set out. And I want limitations that I think are really worth considering in order to understand why Polkadot became what it is today. Now, we saw how Ethereum didn't scale, right? We all of us know that. And the limited throughput of around 15 transactions per second led to network congestion and prohibitively high transaction fees. All of us that have used Ethereum will remember that time where you just couldn't get through your transaction for an hour, or remember when transaction fees spiked to like multiple dollars, if not even $10, $20. But beyond that, the system, was designed to charge one-time only storage fees, which essentially led to state bloat and excessive chain size growth, making it more and more difficult for others, particularly the small man, to participate in securing the network and thereby hindering decentralization. Now, another thing, right? Proof of work, the essential consensus mechanism behind Ethereum and those generations blockchain systems, is an extremely wasteful consensus mechanism. I think we really have to ask, right? Is it really necessary for a system that can facilitate only 15 transactions per second to burn through power at around the same rate of the country of Paraguay? And last but not least, the Ethereum Virtual Machine, right, and smart contracts that run on it turned out to be not an appropriate tool for the more complex innovation that we saw our space needed so badly for the collective vision of this new web to become a reality. So what happened next, right? Next is that we saw a trend emerging of building custom blockchains, right? Rather than building on top of Ethereum, which is limited to smart contracts. Zcash set, for example, out to productionize advanced cryptography technologies such as zero-knowledge proofs. Filecoin set out to build a robust, scalable, decentralized storage network. And since Ethereum back then didn't meet the permissioning confidentiality requirements of enterprises, IBM and JP Morgan created frameworks for permissioned blockchains. And I believe there are really good reasons to choose building a custom blockchain rather than limiting yourself to smart contracts. First, right, if we go through these three that I exemplified here. First, you achieve significantly higher performance by building a state machine optimized to your use case rather than being bottlenecked by a heavy virtual machine. Second, your application will likely be more secure as the attack surface of a smart contract virtual machine is much larger, mostly due to its required generality and therefore complexity, because it got to work for all sorts of applications. And third, by having your own little island when you build your custom blockchain rather than sharing it with all the other projects, your business and in fact your community as well is more sovereign and not dependent on the platform's governance. Now, let's add there were also major challenges with that approach. First, overhead. Most projects out there just couldn't go down the route of building their own blockchain. And that is mostly because it takes years and significant resources to build blockchain software from scratch. In fact, at our company, Parity Technologies, we have done that, I think, precisely 4 times over the past 5 years with Ethereum, Bitcoin, Zcash, and now Polkadot. And, at that time, adequate tools to reduce that barrier, right, to make it easier and cheaper to build custom blockchain just didn't exist. Second, isolation, right? In most cases, custom blockchains being built from scratch just can't talk to each other without going through centralized services. And, if you think about it a bit more, like going through a centralized service defeats the purpose of blockchains in the first place. And again, if we went down that route, right, without interoperability, without them being able to, gain from each other, we would really have ended up with this silos that blockchains promised to break us out in the first place. So the third point is security. Blockchains naturally compete with each other over security resources, regardless of whether they use proof of work or proof of stake as their consensus mechanism, leaving each of them less secure if they do so. And, you got to consider this was around summer 2016. And we really believed it would be worth a shot to try to overcome these challenges. So what we did is we set out to design and build a new and hopefully better system together with our community. This system was called Polkadot. And I think it could technically be described as a blockchain meta protocol, some sort of layer 0 protocol. Right? It really solves these scalability limitations we've seen in the past by utilizing heterogeneous sharding and provides the advantages of custom blockchains without the cost of securing these blockchains being that high. And that all while allowing those custom blockchains to communicate with each other effectively. But beyond that, right? Because it's still quite a lot of work to build like a custom blockchain that that could potentially run on such a network. So what we did is we incentivized and encouraged our community to build modular blockchain SDKs. One of them is Substrate, which Parity Technologies built and provides today. And I believe it's an incredibly interesting and powerful tool to build really innovative stuff in an incredible short amount of time, right? So instead of having to work years to build something like Zcash, I think you can do it in a matter of potentially months if you have done the research before. Now, I think another very important aspect here that I want to highlight around Polkadot, right, is that, beyond it having high throughput, being low cost of building, being highly composable, which we achieve by designing and implementing a way for these chains to communicate to each other, which we call cross-chain messaging. We also wanted it to be highly customized, right? We to leave the limitations of building being only able to do what you can do on smart contract platforms, and give developers and our builders lower level access, right, to come up with more radical stuff. And that's why on Polkadot, what you can do, you can build your custom blockchain, and that means you get access to the runtime itself rather than having to build on top of the runtime. Now, beyond that, of course, we wanted secure and efficient consensus. That's why we set out and designed nominated proof of stake that I all encourage you to dive into. Quite interesting, grandpa, what our research team did now. And the last but not least, there are these points around governance and agency of a network, right? We really wanted a decentralized network that has true agency, right? And transparent governance processes that can be observed on chain, right? So what we did is we implemented a system that allows Polkadot and its stakeholders to take collectively decisions on chain in a relatively transparent way, right? That are enacted automatically. That means there is no off-chain coordination needed, or there is no backroom talk around who upgrades what node and who doesn't for whatever reasons, right? If the community, the token holders come together and say that's the upgrade we want because we think it's the best for the system, it will happen. Now, last but not least, one of the things that we saw hindered blockchain evolution at that time, and particularly these networks that had launched already, was that the network itself didn't have funds, right? It couldn't control funding and thereby couldn't control who to incentivize and give the means to come up with these new ideas, technical ideas that would make the network more powerful. In most cases, in most of these other blockchain networks, you were entirely reliant on some foundation, some legal entity, right, that steers that on their benevolence to some extent. So Polkadot has its own on-chain treasury continuous funding for many, 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 many years to come, potentially the eternity, as it's continuously funded by the network itself. So we believe we got something that guarantees network evolution, which is critical at the time where we are today. Now, let's have a look at what's happened so far overall with where we are. So end of 2016, Gav publishes Polkadot paper. November 2017, we get the first code commit to the joint Polkadot and Substrate repo by Rob Habermeyer. In February 2018, Substrate was extracted out of Polkadot. So like the two repositories were split. And like I'm talking specifically here about Parity Technologies implementation of Polkadot and Substrate, right? There are a bunch of other teams that build Polkadot implementations. Some of them you should definitely look into, as they're super interesting. And so what you see on the right side of this slide, right, is how these repos were split and then evolved. So on the top, you see Polkadot. Really what happened is May 2018, the first proof of concept went live. That was the first public Polkadot testnet. August 2019, we had Kusama goes live. Kusama is Polkadot's wild cousin. It's a canary network, right? It's there to test these radical news ideas before they go on to Polkadot. May 2020, Polkadot goes live and begins a 6-phase launch process that started in May and I believe went through several phases, one being the activation of governance features, and then the activation of token transfers in August. Now, also in August 2020, the Rococo version 1 went live. That was the first public parachains testnet. Parachains being, these custom blockchains that live on Polkadot and communicate with each other and are secured by it. Now, on the Substrate side, we had, in April 2018, Gavin Wood gave the first presentation on Substrate at Event Horizon. In January 2019, we had the first code commits to yet another repo that's based on Substrate. It's called Cumulus and really is there for, making it easy for having your custom blockchain built on Substrate to connect to Polkadot once parachain auctions are live. In June 2019, major milestone, we released Substrate 1.0, and then just recently, a couple of months ago, we released the version 2.0 of Substrate. Now, I want to take the last couple of minutes to dive into where the Polkadot ecosystem is today. So if we have a look, right, let's look at builders. We will see that, if we look at the amount of repositories on GitHub that are tagged with Polkadot Substrate, Electric Capital recently did an analysis or a shout out to the community to add to it. And it was shown that we have 900 plus repositories that are related to the technology of people building on it. Now, with regard to infrastructure, tooling, and integrations that really make Polkadot more powerful and more useful, right, as a framework and as a network. Parity technologies, and I'm just talking about what we as a company track in our ecosystem, is 60 plus products are in development and 30 plus products have already launched. And that does not include any of the products that we build ourselves. Now, with regard to Polkadot-ready blockchains that are built on the tool Substrate, right? We currently track more than 100 companies that currently build blockchains with Substrate to be ready for Polkadot, and 60 of them have already launched testnets. Now, if we look a bit at the Polkadot network activity, I think there are a couple of interesting bits here. One being the security aspect, right? Recently, Polkadot was announced as the #1 proof-of-stake network by value staked. It has almost $3 billion, the equivalent of $3 billion value at stake. On the operational side of validation, we see 244 validators currently validating blocks, as well as 350 validators waiting on the sideline in order to be ready to become an active validator once there are more slots available, as well as 7,000 nominators that empower these validators and give them elector. Now, on the treasury side, I touched on it a bit earlier, right? Kusama and Polkadot treasury. The current combined size of both treasuries is the equivalent of $65 million. And that is going to grow tremendously over the next year, at least to my projections. And I believe, if I look back, I think it's been only since April when the first proposal was funded on Kusama. And so it's roughly 7 months. On both networks together, already in these 7 months, 52 proposals were funded with the equivalent of a total sum of 3.5 million. Now, on the hackathon and conferences side, right? Like we had a couple of really exciting things this year. So in June 2020, we had Kusama was happening, right? There was the first ever hackathon for Polkadot or Kusama. And I believe we had over 500 registered hackers there. Then what followed was just a couple of weeks ago, Sub-Zero Online, the next edition of Substrate's developer conference, where we had over 1,000 live attendees at the event. And last but not least, Hello World by Polkadot with the largest ever Gitcoin event with over 1,000 participants that submitted over 1,800 projects. Now, thank you so much for coming on that journey with me. I highly encourage you to join some of the other talks or perhaps all of the other talks today. And if you are interested in what's next on the tech roadmap, right? Some of these things that I touched on, parachains, right? And like parathreads, I didn't tell you much about it, but I hope Robert Habermeyer, who comes right after me, will shed some light on like what's happening there. And then later on, if you're interested in Polkadot Tech Roadmap, I highly encourage you to also join Tomasz talk about bridges, as well as cross-chain messaging, which together really give you a good idea about interoperability in Polkadot. Thank you very much.